Welcome to the talk. Bit of whiplash going on here. Gorlick's had a wonderful talk before this on securing sexuality, and now we're going to talk about cryptography. Great times. Okay, so the name of my talk is Cryptography Myths and Misconceptions. Who I am? My name's Tony. Hello. I've talked with some of you online. I have been, I should say, a back-end software dev for 10 years now. Currently, I am a PKI / cryptography engineer at a tech company that you might have heard of. My many and numerous opinions should not be taken as a statement of said company. I'm not very hard to find online, but I do have some opinions on that, on this topic. I am not an actual cryptographer. I don't have a master's degree in applied mathematics, cryptography, or anything of that nature, nor do I have a doctorate in this area. I am just an amateur cryptographer nerd who enjoys reading cryptography papers in my room for fun. There's my Mastodon exchange where I like to hang out. So, what is the purpose of this talk? The purpose of me giving this talk, I assume that you may already have some knowledge of cryptography, of how it works, the keys, public and private cryptography, all that fun stuff. Some of the, we've got the Salsa family of ciphers, we have AES, all sorts of good stuff in that space. I remember the first time I read about public-private key cryptography, RSA to be specific. And my first reaction was, what kind of black magic is this stuff? You can send encrypted data over, you can send your public key, and there's really no good way for an attacker to read your data. You can send it over a completely insecure channel. So I pretty much fell down the cryptography rabbit hole and have yet to emerge. But one of the things that the purpose of this talk is really to, obviously cryptography is a very deep topic in so many ways. It combines fields of study from computer science, from just raw math, and constructs them in some very powerful ways. With AES, we have, some very high security margins that if, everything theoretical security has been met, that, you can spend millions of years trying to brute force that, and you will not be able to, at least with your current computing power, et cetera, et cetera. So cryptography is very powerful, but honestly, sometimes it seems like magic. It has its own lingo, it has its own definitions. It definitely has things that you shouldn't do, like, taking your private key to, let's say, your PGP key, throwing it in a zip file and emailing it to a friend saying, hey, can you get this thing to work for me? Anybody who knows anything about cryptography realizes how bad that is. Or taking a private key from your X509 certificate from your website and emailing that to somebody else saying, hello, please fix. Again, not something you want to do. So it very much seems like magic. It very much has its own intricacies. But really, at the end of the day, it's not magic. It uses computer science. It uses, some mathematics that we're very well aware of and have been very well thought out by, people who were frankly geniuses. So there are answers to the questions that people have about cryptography, but sometimes finding those answers is difficult. You almost have to know enough to know that you are asking the right question. Or if you're asking the right question in a wrong way, you're going to be end up at late into the evening, going down a rabbit hole of someone's master's thesis from 2017 and kind of having the hint that maybe you took a wrong turn somewhere. So what I'm trying to do is answer some of the questions that I've seen people pose who, are trying to wrap their head around cryptography, but maybe not quite understand everything fully at this time. So these are some of the questions that either I've been asked in person or online. I've seen other discussions about, my attempt here is to give a somewhat canonical answer as to why something is the way it is, how it works, et cetera, et cetera. So the first one. Now, we've seen this, or at least I've seen this quite a bit, where they're saying, hey, don't use AES-128 ECB mode. They show the nice little picture of Tux here and show after it's been encrypted, you can still make out the data. Yes, we really should use ECB mode. But is it broken? If I use ECB mode in this way, can the data be recovered? Now, to succinctly put it, no, it's not broken. But please don't use this. There are so many better constructions out there that you should be using. Zoom used this back in 2020, and they got called out really hard on it by Citizen Lab and some others. They were using this to encrypt some of their back and forth communication. And it was just a question of, all right, why did you choose that? So many better things out there. But what that picture signifies is not necessarily that AES-128 is broken. It's not. Now, when you're defining broken, that you'd be able to completely uncover the plain text that people want to encrypt, or be able to do a key recovery attack against the ciphertext to tell what kind of key was used and then decrypt it and read the plain text. AES-128 is not broken in that manner. However, if you are using what I like to call low entropy data, if you are shipping, show me the money and then a string of dollar amounts after that, an attacker is going to be able to do some traffic analysis on the things you're sending across the wire. So you are, in respect, something that you don't want your cryptography to be doing is you are giving information to an attacker. That's not good. I like my cryptography to be giving as little information away as possible. That's not something you want to be giving away there. So it's not broken. The attacker can't recover the data. But as you see from this picture, it's still there. If you have somebody who's looking at patterns of what you're sending across the wire, you're going to give them information. Giving information to an attacker is bad. Please don't do it. Now, as I said, AES isn't broken. AES, just raw AES-128. We're realizing now that we'll probably even be secure after a quantum computer comes online. We'll definitely talk about more of that later. As I said earlier, please don't use ECB mode. I have seen occasionally where ECB mode is used in cryptographic libraries for testing purposes. You need some good seemingly random data. Throwing ECB mode in there is a nice way to get it. But really beyond any sort of test parameters, this should not be used at all. Now, what we have to combat this is what we call initialization vectors. Initialization vectors add random data into the underlying plain text so that they can, so that very low entropy, low random data in your cipher, in your plain text, has more encrypted value to it. So I said, instead of using ECB mode, make sure you use something that has a nonce, an initialization vector. The authenticated ciphers that we have that are fairly ubiquitous, please use one of those. Don't make the same mistake Zoom did. Now, to Zoom's credit, they have replaced that now with, I believe, a GCM instead of what they were doing, which is very good for them. So there's a whole lot of better tools out there. Take your pick for your use case. Second question, we just talked about initialization vectors. Does the initialization vector need to be secret? So you have that random data, you're adding it to the data going into your cipher. Does that data need to be kept from an attacker? Now, the funny thing about initialization vectors, you can also call them nonces. I use those terms interchangeably. Don't really feel the need to split hairs about that. Either a nonce or an initialization vector is it does need to be unpredictable when you're adding it. Reusing your nonce, reusing your initialization vector is bad. That will lead to some classes of attacks where you have the attacker able to get pieces of your unencrypted text. So it has to be non-repeating. We've seen attacks against that. But yeah, as kind of a little, it does, to answer the original question, no. This does not have to be secret. It is not considered on the same level as your key. You don't have to consider storing it as such. That does kind of trip people up a little bit when we're talking about initialization vectors and what they do, and honestly, how they can hurt you. But it does need to be random. The next slide. I really debated about putting this in this talk. But it keeps on popping up. Please don't use bad sources of randomness. Every major language, every major operating system has a cryptographically secure source of randomness that you can use for your keys, that you can use for your initialization vectors. Use them, please. The documentation is out there, and it was like, okay, we're in here. We have a good idea of how cryptography works. Why put the slide in? Because it keeps showing up in the cryptography audits that I keep reading about. And at this stage of the game, there's not really a great excuse. It's well documented. Just don't, please. But the second reason that I put that in there is, particularly when it comes to cryptography, we have to be careful that we are understanding where our real risks are and not our hypothetical ones. I see a lot of conversations that get derailed a little bit when we're talking about some very hypothetical, okay, is AES going to get cracked? Is the Salsa family of ciphers secure? Is somebody finally going to break RSA, et cetera, et cetera. So people, sometimes myself included, hyper focus on these extreme risks when the real ones, the ones that are out there, that are known, that are dangerous, can come up and can hurt you. It's kind of a visual illustration of this. Got a nice aluminum foil hat. This may protect me from something, but probably not a whole lot. Any sort of hypothetical risk that this protects me from is really not worth the amount of time and energy it would take to actually get a good fitting tin foil hat. Or, I'm sorry, aluminum foil hat. So when you start talking about some of these risks, you really start putting on your aluminum foil hat with some of this. They're interesting. I said, cryptography nerd myself, how does RSA break? When are we going to break RSA? Is a fascinating question on a personal level. But when we're talking about real risks, when we're talking about data that needs to be secured, you might as well have been talking about alien invasions, Russian dropping paratroopers into Kansas, asteroid strikes, sun going supernova. Because of how much we use cryptography as part of our security, we have to be focusing on those risks and not necessarily the ones that we think may be hypothetical. Okay, the next one. I like this question from a personal standpoint of that when people are asking it and they're trying to get their head wrapped around cryptography and how it works. I think it's a very legitimate question. If we're talking about security products that do this, or people in a professional environment saying we should do something like this, it is crazy making. So should I encrypt things to make them safer? Like, taking an AES-128 and wrapping it in a cha-cha poly construction and say, here, it's double encrypted. If one of these falls, I'll be extra double super secure. Please don't. And I would also point out that any sort of product out there that claims to have extra security because this, I would call into question about whether or not they really understand cryptography. One of my favorite quotes about this, cryptography is the process of taking a secret problem and turning it into a key management problem. The more crypto you do, the more you have to worry about where are you storing your keys. Are those keys secure? Can they be accessed by the right people? Can they be accessed at the right time? So moving beyond that, when you have that double encryption, you're taking 2 times the risk for the keys. You're spending 2 times the risk for the CPU. You take 2 times the risk for the code to do the encryption and decryption. And that's where your actual risks are. AES has been a standard since 2001. I don't remember when the Salsa family of ciphers also came online. Very secure, very strong. They are well studied in terms of we know where the breaks are. But with some of the actual risks, you see software implementations, side channel attacks. Those are always fun. Key leakage, using old unpatched software. So when you're saying, hey, when we're talking about knowing where our real risks are, doing that double encryption is increasing your real risks only to protect against your tinfoil hat. Now, yeah, AES could be broken, maybe at some point, but very hypothetical where having your keys leak, a much bigger and very much real risk. So, encryption is very strong. Only one time is needed. Just encrypt it, use a nice well-audited library, make it make sense for your use case. Now this question is a fun one. And if you are engaged in it online, it's going to be a blast or it's going to go off the rails really fast. Has the one world shadow government broken all of our crypto? I actually like that exchange that they had in the movie Oppenheimer, where he says, "Well, the chances are near zero." Are you sure about that? I am not a government contractor, nor a government employee, nor do I have any sort of government clearance. So this contains a lot of conjecture here, hopefully not of the aluminum foil type. But one of the things that I want to just looking at some of the output that we've had from government intelligence agencies, particularly the one that I really remember, Curveball. This was dropped by the NSA back in 2020. It was scary. It was scary enough, at least to me, that I remember when and where I started reading through talking about what it could do. So it just affected the Windows Crypto API. But for an elliptical curve certificate, if you supplied the public key and you supplied some very goofy elliptical curve parameters, you could confuse Windows to saying that, yes, this is a valid certificate. Then you could do all sorts of fun stuff. That's kind of scary. They dropped that thing out of the blue, and I was like, holy cow, that you can mess with some things. Honestly, I was a little surprised. That, thankfully, Microsoft was on top of this and got the updates out. So, had some very scary capability. The interesting thing is, after it got remediated, started looking at some other crypto libraries, and we saw that this only affected the Windows Crypto API because of how it was doing curve validation. Some of the other crypto libraries out there for different systems are saying, hey, this doesn't affect us because we're not allowing the user to submit weird curve information parameters. So the interesting thing about this attack was not that, not to diminish it, it was scary. Scared the pants off of me, to be honest. But it was following known issues in curve verification. Something similar had struck an early version of Let's Encrypt as well. So it was following known issues, very much ahead of its where everyone else was in terms of looking at it. But it was scary. Second one got dropped from a cryptographer working with the Israeli IDF. Not nearly as scary, but still a very interesting attack. NIST had started verifying some of the curves coming in, or some of the lattices for its for the post quantum. It was solid work. It made a splash, but it was not anything that no one had heard of. It was, improved dual lattice attack. It was an attack that was a speed up on something that people were already looking at. So why bring this up? Governments have scary resources that definitely need to be respected. But government agencies do not have access to unicorns and fairy dust. Please don't assume that they do. And if, from the NSA, you do have unicorns, give me a call. I'd be interested. Unicorns are cool. Okay. Now, the next one that I'm running a little short on time here, so I'm going to go through it fast. Quantum computers. I don't know if your inbox looks the same as mine, but there is a lot of questions going around about what their capabilities are, how quantum is going to survive. A few moments I have left. I'm going to attempt to offer a little bit of clarity, as well as showing, where the work currently is and some of the unanswered questions that are in the space. So, public key crypto doomed by quantum computing. For RSA, elliptical curves, yeah, they're cooked. All the math we have says that they are. However, we have some new well-studied mechanisms and lattices. Lattices have been patented. Thankfully, that patent expired since the 90s. They're well studied. They're well known. They're nice constructs. The key encapsulation mechanism, which is how we're going to be using to exchange those encryption keys between your browser and the server, is already a test flag in Chrome 116. Signal and iMessage have post-quantum implementations that are pretty slick. The latest bug called Kyber Slash is not necessarily a protocol attack. It is a timing attack, which, as I said, those are always fun from a cryptography point of view. So there's a lot of solid work going on here. There's a lot of things that, a lot of good work that people have done that we can be proud of, that say, okay, this type of encryption is going to be protected against an attack. Now, there's still a lot of work to be done. We have chems, but there are some very much unanswered questions that people are starting to look at. I took this slide from the Google crypto team. They had a great blog post about this. But if I can draw your attention to the ciphertext signature size of the two on the bottom. So you have your classical digital signatures, 64 bits. That looks great. They increase a ton. So where some of the work is ongoing right now are going to be signatures. Because spoofing a signature needs to happen at runtime. At least for TLS, we have some breathing room, but you notice that iMessage, Signal, Chrome, they're all using classical signatures. We don't really have a great candidate for a post-quantum secure signal. So certificate transparency logs, thinking let's encrypt, where CAs are sending their logs to. Those signatures are going to cause those logs to blow up. Again, not fun. Code signing, also definitely some issues there. So at this point where I'm sitting, there's not a great golden path forward. People are working on it. There's no need to panic. Lots of solid people working on this. We have some nice work coming down the pipe, I think. But that is still very much how that is going to play out in the future is still very much an open question. So I would say there's no need to panic. But also if someone is saying, hey, this is the one true way forward, I'd also question how much they know about actual cryptography. So that is all for now. Thank you. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the talks at CypherCon.